The bell above the pawn shop door let out a dull chime as Walter Briggs stepped inside. The December wind had followed him in, brushing past the dusty shelves filled with scratched guitars, tangled necklaces, and outdated electronics. The smell. Inside was thick, old leather, metal, and stale air. Walter paused near the entrance. His coat was worn, the sleeves frayed, and the color had long since faded from deep green to a tired gray. The military patches stitched to his shoulders were barely readable now, but he still wore the jacket with pride. It was the only thing he had left from the life he once lived, a life most people never asked about. In his hand he held a small, velvet case. It was clutched tightly, his fingers slightly shaking. Not because he was cold, although the chill had long crept into his bones. It was something else. It was the weight of what he carried inside that box, and what it meant to part with it. Walter looked around. A young man stood behind the counter tapping on his phone, his music barely hidden under one earbud. Another employee leaned lazily against the glass display case, chewing gum, eyes half-lidded from boredom. Walter slowly walked toward the counter, each step deliberate. It felt wrong. Every part of it felt wrong. But rent was overdue again. The Audier space heater at his apartment had given up weeks ago. His pension barely stretched past groceries. He had gone through every option he could think of. All that remained was what he had sworn never to do: pawn the only piece of his past that still made him feel like he had mattered. He cleared his throat softly, placing the small box gently on the glass counter. The young clerk behind the counter looked up, eyebrow raised. "You selling something?" Walter nodded once slowly. "Yes. I need to know how much you will give me for this." He opened the box with care, revealing the heart-shaped metal inside. The Purple Heart caught the shop's overhead lights, glinting briefly. It was still clean, polished, and carefully preserved, resting against the dark velvet lining. The clerk leaned in, squinting at it. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked with a smirk, lifting the metal with two fingers like it was a broken toy. Walter did not flinch. "That is a Purple Heart. It was awarded to me after I was wounded during combat." The other employee, nearby, a taller man with a thick beard, snorted. "Combat? This guy? He looks like he has trouble lifting his own groceries." The younger clerk laughed, flipping the metal over. "You sure this is not one of those knockoffs? People sell this kind of stuff online all the time. Bet you got it for $10. Walter's voice was calm, though there was a heaviness in. "Tursun, I was shot 3 times in Cambodia in 1971. I did not get that medal online." "Cambodia?" The bearded clerk scoffed. "What is that? A street name or something?" Both clerks started laughing now. It was not just laughter. It was mockery, laced with that cruel edge only those who had never sacrificed anything seemed to carry. The younger one shook his head. "You are probably just another old guy with a good story and an empty wallet." Walter stood still. The warmth had drained from his hands. He looked at them, rough and scarred, each mark a reminder of the years he had spent crawling through jungles, dragging wounded friends across muddy terrain, and holding rifles until his knuckles bled. None of that mattered here. In this shop, with its flickering lights and cheap laughter, none of it meant a thing. He did not respond. There was no use. He had fought for freedom once, risked his life for strangers. And now, years later, he was just a punchline to 2 bored men behind a pawn counter. "I did not come here for trouble," Walter said quietly. "I just needed help." "Then maybe try Social Security," the bearded man replied, grinning. "This is a business, not a charity. You want money, bring in something real." Walter reached out and gently took the medal back. He placed it carefully into the box and closed it. His hands were still shaking, but he did not let them see it. He held his head high. The younger clerk, sensing perhaps that the moment was a little heavier than he thought, tried to cover it up with another joke. "You know, maybe if you wore that to a bar, someone would buy you a drink." Walter did not answer. He turned around slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders. His shoes scraped against the dusty tile floor. He took a step, then another. Behind him the laughter faded, but the sting of it remained. Just as he reached the door, another man stood from a chair in the far back corner of the pawn shop. He had been sitting there quietly, reading a worn paperback, occasionally glancing up. He had watched the entire scene unfold without saying a word, until now. He stood up slowly, tall and broad-shouldered, with a calmness in his eyes that was more dangerous than anger. He wore jeans and a plain gray hoodie, nothing remarkable, but the way he moved, the way he stood, there was something sharp underneath the stillness. His name was Logan Hayes, and he had not come to this shop looking for trouble either. But sometimes, trouble finds you when you least expect it. Walter opened. The door and the cold air rushed in again. He paused for a moment, glancing down at the case in his hands. He looked like a man carrying the last piece of his soul in his palm. Then Logan spoke. "You forgot to salute him," he said firmly, loud enough for the whole store to hear. Both clerks turned to look at him. "What did you say?" Chase asked. Logan walked forward slowly. "You forgot to salute him. That man you just laughed at, that man earned something you will never understand." The room went quiet. Even the bearded clerk stopped chewing his gum. Logan kept walking until he reached the counter. His voice was steady, but there was a steel edge to it. "That medal is not a toy. It is not something you make jokes about. That is a Purple Heart. That means he took bullets so people like you could run businesses and play music in your ears all day." Chase shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we were just messing around. It was not that serious." Logan leaned forward. "It was serious enough for him to walk out of here without the help he needed. Serious enough for you to laugh at something sacred. Serious enough that I think you owe that man an apology." The clerks were silent now. Not because they were sorry, but because something in Logan's posture, something in his eyes, told them this was not a man who made empty statements. Walter, still standing near the door, turned slightly, watching. Logan looked at him, and for the first time, his expression softened. "Sir," he said with a respectful nod, "would you allow me to buy that medal from you? Not to keep it, just to make sure it never ends up in the hands of people who do not deserve to touch it." Walter did not speak right away. His eyes scanned Logan's face, then the clerks behind the counter. Finally, he walked back toward the counter and placed the box down once more. "I am not selling it," he said, "but thank you." Logan nodded once more. "Then let me walk you home." Walter hesitated, then finally gave a small, tired smile. Outside, the winter wind still howled, but the silence inside the shop felt colder. The clerks remained still, uncertain now, unsure of what had just happened, or who exactly had stood before them and shown them what real honor looked like. As the glass door swung shut behind Walter Briggs, the cold wind was quickly replaced by a silence that felt heavy. For a moment, the two clerks behind the counter stood still. The air in Carter's pawn shop, once filled with mocking laughter, now carried a different tension. The older clerk, Vince, turned back to the register, still chewing his gum with a lazy smirk, while the younger one, Chase, looked down at the counter where the old man had stood moments ago. The velvet outline of the small metal case had left a faint mark on the glass, as if the weight of history had pressed itself into the shop without permission. From the far corner of the store, a quiet voice spoke, low and direct. You boys really do not know who that man was, do you? Chase glanced over. He had almost forgotten there had been someone else sitting in the back. The man stood now, tall and composed, walking forward with a steady calmness. He was broad-shouldered, muscular without showing off, and carried the kind of presence that made people move aside without needing to be told. He wore plain clothes, dark jeans, boots, a fitted gray hoodie. But there was something about him that made him look like he belonged more in a war zone than in a pawn shop. Vince raised an eyebrow, uninterested. Yeah? And who are you supposed to be? The uniformed police? The man stepped up to the counter and looked directly at Chase. You said he probably never saw combat. You laughed at a man holding a Purple Heart. Do you even know what that medal stands for? Chase shifted, uncertain whether to play it off or stand his ground. It means he got injured or something, right? I mean, whatever. We were just messing around, it is not that deep. The man's eyes narrowed. That medal means that man shed his blood for this country. It means he put himself between danger and people like you. It is not a souvenir. It is not some story. That man was willing to die, and he lived with wounds that probably never healed. You do not get to laugh at that. Chase crossed his arms. What are you? His son or something? The man leaned forward slightly, just enough that the space between them seemed to shrink. No. My name is Logan Hayes. I am a Navy SEAL. I buried men who never got to bring their Purple Hearts home. Everything stopped. The hum of the overhead lights, the music still faintly leaking from the earbuds, the lazy back and forth of everyday noise. It all faded into nothing. Logan's tone had not changed, but the truth in his voice was louder than a shout. Chase opened his mouth, then closed it again. Vince looked away, pretending to rearrange some items under the counter. Logan glanced toward the door, where the outline of Walter Briggs had disappeared into the street. That man is a legend, he said quietly. And you just threw dirt on his name like he was nobody. Chase finally found his voice. Okay, fine. Maybe he served, I do not know, but the guy looked like he needed cash. You cannot expect us to treat every old guy like a hero. Logan turned his eyes back to Chase, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something darker. You should. Until you know otherwise, you should treat every single one of them like they might have held the line when the rest of us could not. He paused. Walter Briggs did not just serve. He saved lives. One of them was my father. Both clerks looked at him now, stunned. Logan placed his phone on the counter and tapped the screen. A photograph filled the display. A group of young men in jungle fatigue stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces sunburnt and sweat-covered. Smiles, forced through exhaustion. In the center stood a younger Walter Briggs, clean-shaven, solid, with the same sharp eyes and steady posture he had walked in with. That picture was taken in 1971, Logan said. Cambodia. The mission was not supposed to go loud, it did. My father's team got pinned down, radio was dead, backup was miles away. They would have all died out there. He pointed at the photo. But Walter went back, 3 times. He carried 2 men on his back under fire, then ran back for the last one, my father. Took a bullet to the chest, another in the leg, and kept crawling until he dragged my father out. He should not have survived. He did. Logan tapped the screen again. A second photo appeared. An older version of the same group, much smaller now, standing at a gravesite with folded flags and bowed heads. Logan's voice softened, but the weight of his words only grew heavier. Every man in that photo except Walter is gone now. Some to time, some to war, some to their own memories. But they all said the same thing before they died. If not for Briggs, I would not be here. Vince had stopped pretending to be busy now. His face had gone pale. Chase looked down, staring at the glass countertop like it had suddenly become the most important thing in the world. Logan continued. He came home to nothing. No parade, no welcome, no family. He worked odd jobs, lost his wife to illness, watched his neighborhood change until no one remembered who he was. But he never complained. He never asked for thanks. He looked toward the door again, almost like he could still see Walter walking away. And now when the man needs help the most, this is how you treat him. There was a long silence. Then Chase spoke, his voice quiet. I did not know. I did not realize. That is the problem, Logan replied. No one does. No one wants to know. He picked up his phone, slid it back into his pocket, and then pulled out his wallet. He placed 3 crisp $100 bills on the counter. Tell me what he was asking for that medal. I am buying it back. But not for me, for him. Chase blinked. You do not have to. I know I do not have to. Logan cut in. I want to. He glanced around the store, letting his eyes fall on the dusty shelves and flickering lights. This place will forget him tomorrow. The world already did. But I will not. He turned to leave, then stopped. And neither should you. Logan walked toward the door, his boots echoing softly against the tile floor. Just before he stepped outside, he paused, his hand resting on the handle. He looked back once more. One more thing, he said. That medal. It is not just metal and ribbon, it is a story, a scar, a soul. He opened the door, cold air swept in again. If you are going to run a business where people bring you their most desperate moments, the least you can do is treat them like human beings. And with that, he stepped outside into the cold. The clerks stood frozen, the weight of their ignorance pressing down harder than anything else ever had in that quiet little pawn shop. Out on the sidewalk, Logan looked both ways, then spotted Walter about half a block away, slowly making his way toward the bus stop. He began to walk, his pace quick but purposeful. The medal needed to go back to the man who earned it. But more than that, the truth needed to be heard, and Logan Hayes was ready to make sure it would be. Logan stood still for a moment outside the pawn shop, his eyes fixed on the fragile figure of Walter Briggs disappearing in the distance. Each step Walter took seemed heavier than the last, weighed down by years no one had cared to ask about. Logan took a breath and moved forward, catching up to him just before the old man reached the rusted bus bench at the end of the block. Walter turned slightly, surprised to hear footsteps beside him. He looked up at Logan, his expression guarded. I do not need charity, Walter said quietly. Logan shook his head. This is not charity. This is long overdue respect. Walter narrowed his eyes, taking in the younger man. He could still recognize the walk of someone who had seen combat. It was the kind of instinct that never left you. Who are you? He asked. Logan extended his hand. Logan Hayes. My father was Lieutenant Mark Hayes. You saved his life in Cambodia. He told me about you my entire life. Walter stared for a moment, then slowly took the hand. His grip, though thin and weathered, still had strength in it. He let out a soft breath that might have been a memory rising to the surface. Mark Hayes, Walter said. I remember him. Smart, brave. Took a piece of shrapnel to the ribs but never made a sound. Logan nodded. He passed 2 years ago, but he never forgot you. None of us did. Walter sat slowly on the bench. Logan sat beside him, the street noise fading into the background. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Logan reached into his jacket and pulled out the metal case. "I bought it back," he said. They had no idea who they were laughing at. Walter took the case in his hands but did not open it. He simply looked down at it, as if the weight of everything it represented was heavier than steel. "I did not want to sell it," he said, "but I had no choice. Social Security barely covers food these days. My furnace broke last month. Heat or groceries. You cannot have both." Logan nodded solemnly. "You should never have to make that kind of choice." Walter gave a tired smile. "That is the story no one wants to hear. Not on television, not in classrooms. They want heroes in uniform, but they do not want to see what happens when the war ends." Logan looked over at him. "I want them to know your story." Walter glanced sideways. "Why?" "Because it is the truth," Logan said. "And people have forgotten the truth." He pulled out his phone and tapped on a folder. Dozens of photographs filled the screen. Faded snapshots, military reports, old letters. He turned the screen toward Walter. "My father kept everything. He said you were the bravest man he ever met. You carried him out when you were already shot twice. You came, back under fire for 2 more men. They called in a medevac, but you stayed behind until the last chopper left. You were the last one out of that jungle alive." Walter looked down again, his voice barely above a whisper. "That was a long time ago." Logan scrolled to a grainy photo, young men in mud-streaked fatigues posing in front of a burnt-out hut. At the center, Walter Briggs stood with his arm around a skinny officer with a crooked grin. "That is my dad," Logan said. "And that is you." Walter studied the photo, as if seeing ghosts. "I have not seen that picture in 50 years, he said. "Thought they all got lost when I moved." Logan turned the screen again and began scrolling. "There is more. These are all the files I could find. After Dad passed, I went through his journals. He called you the quiet one. He said you never spoke unless it mattered, but when it did, everyone listened. He said there was a day when you saved the entire unit by predicting an ambush no one else saw coming." Walter nodded slightly. "I remember that ridge. Red clay. You could smell the trap before you saw it." Logan tapped again. "There is a military citation in here. It was never sent to you. Looks like it got buried in some file room. You were nominated for the Silver Star." Walter blinked. "What?" Logan handed him the screen. "Read it." Walter took the phone slowly, holding it with both hands. His eyes moved across the document. "For acts of gallantry and intrepidity in action while engaged in military operations involving conflict with an opposing foreign force." He paused, his lips pressing together tightly. "No one ever told me." Logan nodded. "They forgot. Just like they forgot your name when you came home. You were just another soldier with scars and no family. No medals in parades, no interviews, no help." Walter closed the phone gently and handed it back. "I never needed a parade. I just needed to matter." Logan stood. "You do matter, and we are going to make sure everyone knows it." Walter looked up. "What do you mean?" Logan extended his hand again. "Come back with me. To the shop. I want them to hear your story." Walter hesitated. "What for?" They already laughed. "Then let them be the ones who have to face the truth," Logan said. "The real truth. About what men like you did. About what they gave up. They cannot learn if they do not hear it." Walter took a breath, then slowly rose from the bench. He nodded once, then followed Logan. Back at Carter's pawn shop, the atmosphere had shifted. Word had spread. A few customers remained inside, whispering quietly. Vince and Chase stood behind the counter. their earlier arrogance replaced by unease. When Logan walked back in with Walter beside him, the silence returned. Logan stepped forward. "I said I would not let the world forget him. I meant it." He turned to Walter. "Tell them what happened. Not for pity, for truth." Walter looked around the shop. His eyes scanned each face slowly. "I was drafted at 19, he said. Went to boot camp in Texas, first time I ever left home. We were poor. My dad drank. My mother died before I graduated. I figured war could not be worse." He paused. No one spoke. "I served 2 tours. Cambodia, Laos, deep jungle. We were not supposed to be there officially, but we were. Nights were filled with gunfire and malaria. Days were filled with heat and silence and waiting to die." Chase shifted, nervously. Walter continued. "I earned my Purple Heart in 1971. A mortar round took out our position. Half my squad was gone. I dragged 3 men back to safety under sniper fire. I got shot 3 times. Still do not remember passing out. Just woke up in a hospital with bandages and no names to ask about." His voice softened. "When I came home, there were no handshakes, no jobs. I went to the VA. They gave me pills and said I was lucky. I tried working. I tried drinking. I tried forgetting. Nothing worked." He looked at Chase directly. "That medal? That was not for glory. That was for pain. For everything I saw and could not forget. For the men who never came back. I only kept it because it reminded me I survived." Chase swallowed hard, his face pale. Walter turned to Logan. "But you remembered. Your father remembered. That is enough." Logan turned to the room. "This is not just about him. This is about every man and woman who was discarded when they were no longer useful. Walter Briggs did not ask for attention. He asked for dignity." A woman near the back stepped forward quietly. "I lost my brother in Vietnam," she said. "I never knew any of this." Logan nodded, "Because no one ever told it. But that ends now." He pulled out his phone. "I am going to share his story. Every photo, every detail, every piece of forgotten truth. And I want you all to do the same." One by one, people began to nod. Some reached for their own phones. Chase looked down, then stepped out from behind the counter. He walked up to Walter and held out his hand. "I am sorry," he said. "For everything." Walter took the hand. "Just remember next time. That is all I want." Outside, the clouds had begun to part. Sunlight stretched across the sidewalk, as if the sky itself had decided to listen. For the first time in decades, Walter Briggs was not invisible, and his story, America's forgotten story, was just beginning to be heard. The wind had settled, but Logan's heart still raced as he stepped out of Carter's pawn shop. Behind him, the door slowly closed, muffling the murmurs inside, but the weight of what had just happened still pressed heavy on the air. He scanned the sidewalk and quickly spotted Walter Briggs walking slowly toward the bus stop down the block, shoulders slumped not in defeat, but in quiet dignity. Logan jogged to catch up. His footsteps echoed in the quiet stretch of the street as he reached Walter's side. Without a word, he placed a small white envelope into the older man's hand. Walter looked down at it, confused. "What is this?" he asked. "A thank you," Logan said simply. Walter opened the envelope. Inside was a neat stack of $100 bills, $10,000 in total. Walter's hand trembled slightly as he looked at it. "I do not need charity," he whispered, voice low and almost pleading. "It is not charity," Logan replied, his tone steady but gentle. "It is from a grateful son. You saved my father's life in a jungle no one remembers. Because of you, I got to grow up with my dad. Because of you, he got to teach me how to ride a bike, how to shave, how to be a man. That money is not charity, it is gratitude. Walter stared down at the envelope for a long moment, his jaw tightening, eyes blinking rapidly. For decades, no one had seen him. Not really. But now, someone did. Someone finally remembered. Logan reached into his jacket again and pulled out something else. A new metal case. He held it carefully, both hands cradling the small black box as though it held something sacred. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly as Logan opened the case and turned it toward him. Inside sat his purple heart, the same metal he had once pawned in desperation. But now, it had changed. Below the familiar metal was an engraved gold plaque. It read, Sergeant Walter Briggs, hero, brother, never forgotten. Walter reached out, almost afraid to touch it. He ran his fingers across the engraving as if needing to confirm it was real. I had it restored, Logan said softly. And I added the inscription. Because you are not just a name from the past. You are a symbol of every forgotten sacrifice. You deserve to be remembered. Walter nodded slowly, emotion rising in his throat but no words forming. His eyes were glassy, filled with something that looked like a mixture of sorrow and healing. Logan continued. I posted your story online, just the truth. What you went through, what you did. What happened in that pawn shop? It went viral, Walter. Thousands of veterans have shared it. People are talking. Donations are pouring in. There is a local foundation. They want to offer you a place to live, free of charge. No more broken furnaces, no more choosing between heat and food. Walter's lips parted, stunned. Why now? Because truth speaks louder than silence, Logan replied. People are finally listening. Just then, the door to the pawn shop creaked open again. Chase stepped out. His face was pale, his expression hollowed by shame. He held something small and folded in his hands, a piece of notebook paper. He walked slowly to Walter and stopped in front of him. I wrote something, Chase said quietly. I do not expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I am not the same guy who mocked you. He handed the note to Walter, then stepped back without saying another word. Walter unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was uneven, but the words were clear. I am sorry. I was ignorant. You are a better man than I will ever be. Walter stood silently, his lips pressing together, but he did not look away. He held the note in one hand, the metal in the other, and let the wind lift the edges of the paper gently, as if the words needed air to live. He looked at Chase, not with anger, not even with pity, but with something deeper. Understanding. The kind that comes from carrying pain and choosing not to pass it on. Walter took one step back, straightened his shoulders, and lifted his right hand in a crisp, perfect salute, eyes locked on Logan. It was not for thanks. It was not for attention. It was a gesture of respect. Soldier to soldier. Man to man. Logan returned the salute. Walter gave one last nod, then turned and began walking down the street, but this time his back was not hunched. His steps were slow but strong. He was not walking away in shame. He was walking forward in dignity, head held high, the wind now at his back. He did not look back. He did not have to. For the first time in decades, the world had seen him, and more importantly, they had heard him. 2 weeks later, Logan stood at the gates of a quiet retirement community nestled in the hills just outside of town. It was peaceful here. The trees moved gently with the breeze and the air smelled of pine and fresh earth. He carried with him a leather binder, packed with printouts, articles, screenshots, letters from strangers, and photos sent by veterans across the country. The story of Walter Briggs had grown into something no one expected. Veterans had come forward with their own stories. Families had written in to say their children asked questions for the first time. Schools had invited Walter to speak. Organizations had offered him honors, not as a token, but as a course correction. Long overdue. Logan walked through the hallway to Walter's room, knocked once, and entered. Walter sat by the window, a blanket across his lap, the medal resting on the table beside him. He looked up and smiled. "You again?" Logan smiled back. "Always." He set the binder down and opened it. "You should see this. Over 5 million people have read your story. Some are calling you the voice of a forgotten generation." Walter chuckled. "That is too heavy a title for an old man." "No," Logan said. "It is not. You carried the silence for long enough. It is your turn to speak." Walter nodded slowly. "I never thought it would matter. Not the pain, not the nights I woke up sweating, not the faces I see when I close my eyes." He paused. "But maybe now, it does." Logan sat beside him, and for a moment, they just looked out the window. 2 generations, 1 story. Outside, a group of teenagers walked by, part of a local school's volunteer program. One of them noticed the Purple Heart through the window. She pointed, her eyes wide. Walter saw it, and this time, instead of shrinking back, he lifted the medal and held it to the glass. The girl smiled. That simple smile said everything. This was no longer a story about war. It was a story about remembrance, about what happens when someone who was discarded is given the dignity to stand tall once more, about a medal that was never about medal and ribbon, but about lives, scars, sacrifice, and the deep human need to be seen. As the sun lowered beyond the hills, Walter closed his eyes for a moment and let the warmth fall across his face. He did not speak. He did not need to. The world had finally listened.